Alright, it's February 8th, and I just got out here this morning for what I guess is my first official shed hunt of the year. I've picked up a few so far already, just doing, work on the properties and things like that. But like I said, February 8th, Super Bowl weekend. This is typically, at least for me here in Iowa, when I target my first walk. I try to at least wait until this Super Bowl weekend time frame every year to start walking. And of course I monitor, the cameras that I still have left out in the field, but in general this is a time frame, and I figured just today as I'm walking through here I'd talk about some of the things I think about when it comes to that timing, why I target certain dates, which day specifically, that type of stuff. So I'm gonna take a walk. I'm gonna start with some of the better spots on this property, at least the better bedding. Pretty good topography here, so I'm gonna focus on some of these ridges that have somewhat of a southeast aspect to it. And I'll kind of talk through, like I said, the timing and stuff like that as we go. So hopefully I can pick up an antler or two today. I'm coming up on one of the better south-facing slopes here, and I've picked up a few sheds in this spot over the year, so hopefully I can find one here pretty soon. But getting back to the timing, one of the most obvious answers as to when to shed hunt is when you have time. Sometimes that's the biggest challenge. But going a little bit deeper like that, I think one of the first considerations you need to think about is the property itself and where you're going. Is it a property that could be prone to trespassing and guys could get through there before you? Is it a shared property? Is it public land? How much shed hunting competition and pressure are you going to have? If none at all, or chances of not being very much, you can afford to wait a little bit longer and not risk going in too early and bumping those bucks off of the property. In cases where I do want to get in a little bit earlier, this property is an example. I have had trespassers here before during the shed season, so I'm out here on the early end, obviously, but I'm not going to cover the entire property. That's the other thing. If I'm going early, I'll strategically start on one side and not go all the way through, that knowing that if I'm bumping deer, they're likely not going to leave the property. They're going to relocate to the other side, but I'm not running them completely off. So think about, first of all, is it a property you just have access to, or are you going to be competing with other people? The other aspect too that you want to beat is rodent pressure. Squirrels chewing up antlers that have been sitting on the ground for a long time. I typically see that most often, at least them getting chewed quickly on years where there's snow cover. When there's no snow cover and squirrels and rodents, whatever, can get to other things, I think they're a little bit less likely to go chew on that antler. But if everything's snow covered and you got tines sticking up, basically, with nothing else around, or the beams sticking up or whatever, that's when I see the early chewing. Antler doesn't have to be on the ground very long to start getting damaged pretty good. So think about that too. You don't want to wait too long. And an antler that you're hoping to find ends up getting chewed up pretty good, or tines chewed off. So a couple quick things there to think about when it comes to the timing of when you start shed hunting. Probably can't see it because I just have my GoPro in there 70 yards away, but a couple of raccoons mating right there. I've never seen that before. I could hear it. I wasn't sure what that noise was. Pretty cool rub right there. I love coming up on top of this ridge each year and seeing how much that's been worked. There's quite a few of them, some really big ones right around here. It's one of the highest points on the property, really thick too, but you know, a buck bedding up here can have multiple escape routes. This ridge falls off on multiple directions. Like I said, it's thick, but you can see everything down below. So just a cool spot for a buck to core up. But this property's interesting. You know, when I talk about coming out here and trying to look for sheds, like, it's always a wild card, because while this property probably has the best cover and security in the neighborhood, I have no food planted on this property. So it's basically just natural browse. And it was interesting to watch my cameras this year. We had a period of a couple weeks where we had snow, and the cameras went completely dead during that time frame when there was snow cover, because that obviously further limits the amount of browse that's available for these deer. But then as soon as that snow melted off, the cameras lit up again, and there's a bunch of deer in here. So depending on, you know, what time frame they shed, you know, these antlers there's quite a few bucks around here, but they could be anywhere in the neighborhood depending on where they were going to feed. So it's kind of a trade-off, obviously. You know, if you're comparing it, I'd rather have the bedding, but food would certainly keep these deer closer on a more of a year-round basis if I had a little bit more of it on this property specifically. A lot of buck sign, no antlers yet coming off this first section. So I'm gonna head up to this next ridge. But the other big consideration, you know, when it comes to the best time to shed hunt, is how many bucks in your area have actually lost their antlers. And so over the years, my buddy and I have this theory. It's kind of a general rule of thumb, and obviously isn't going to apply to the entire country, but at least here where we're at in Iowa, he and I, you know, just every year we text back and forth about the percentage of bucks dropped. And our theory, and it's certainly not scientific, but it has held pretty dang close to being true over the years. We kind of just monitor it. But the number of days past January 1st has a pretty close correlation to the percentage of antlers that have dropped. And so, like, let's say, you know, it's January 30th, 30% of the bucks have shed. And so, you know, now today, as I'm sitting here February 8th, we're pushing 40%. And so, like I said, monitoring cameras and observation, all that type of stuff, it's been almost unbelievably close over the years, you know, just as a general rule of thumb. And the other thing too is, you know, that's kind of general population shed. Typically your bigger antlers are going to be some of the earlier ones to fall. Not always. I've seen, you know, really good bucks 150 plus hold, you know, well into late March. And so it's not perfect, but in general your bigger antlers are going to fall, and some of you earlier, and some of your smaller antlered younger deer are going to hold on a little bit later. So when I'm saying roughly 40%, I'm talking about the general population. I would say the percentage of larger antlers is going to be higher than 40% as we sit right now. I bet it's, you know, closer to 60 of the bigger antler bucks have shed based on, you know, my cameras around here. So like I said, not scientific, but kind of a fun rule of thumb that, you know, you could, you know, check and see if it applies to your area, or, you know, potentially utilize. So another consideration as to when to shed hunt. Again, you don't want to go too early when most of the bucks are still carrying, risking, one, just wasting your time looking for antlers that aren't on the ground, but two, risking bumping the deer off to somewhere else to shed their antlers. Well, the snow is starting to fall a lot more rapid now. It was just kind of a little bit of ice spitting, but it's turned into falling snowflakes. And I wanted to talk a little more specifically. If you have the opportunity to pick your days to shed hunt based on weather, there are certain conditions where you're just going to find more sheds just from the fact you're going to miss fewer of them. And those are those cloudy days, one, because you eliminate the shadows. The shadows, especially in the timber, make it tougher to spot antlers. The perfect scenario is after a rain too, or during a rain for that matter. So you got the cloudiness, but you also got the rain basically leveling that forest floor. It kind of presses down on all the leaves, making the antlers stick out a lot more. So those are the best conditions. Today was overcast, but it wasn't wet. But now, this ground is turning white really quickly now. So I'm not gonna probably walk too much longer. I have one more section I want to hit here, and then it's just the conditions are just getting too tough. I did just run out a few bucks. Two were shed, one was a half rack, and two of them were holding both sides. So again, that kind of lines up with what I was talking about previously. They just ran out of this section and went across the field here. Biggest one was probably a 130-inch 3-year-old or so. So I'm gonna hit this section here, and hopefully I can find one before I end the day. Well, it didn't get skunked. Kind of a cool little 4-point side, little hole in the horn there. There's kind of this little grassy opening overlooking, or at the top of this ridge, kind of overlooking this bottom. Good to pick one up. My camera died, so I had to run back and grab another battery, but while I was down the bottom, as you saw, I found that deadhead. Obviously not what you want to see. Probably a 2 or 3-year-old 10 with junk on the bases. Looks like a deer that had loads of potential. So that's a bummer. I got one more spot I want to hit while I'm up here, and then I'm gonna get out of here. The snow kind of changed things, made it tougher as fast as it fell. It's lightened up now, but like I said earlier, I don't want to cover the whole property today. I want to just cover part of it, and then I'll come back in a couple of weeks probably. So I'm gonna hit one more spot and get out of here. I was just walking up this lane that kind of leads out of here. Looked over and there's maybe another little 4-point side laying there, tines down. It looks like it's been there a little while. Well, that's 2 sheds at least. So not a bad way to finish my little walk here. Might take a quick stroll through here to see if there's a match laying or another antler. But like I said earlier, I think another thing with regards to timing is not being afraid to circle back to some of these spots that you hit once. I think the tendency sometimes, even for myself, is I'll hit a spot and then I'll just hope I pick up the easy ones, and then never circle back or never hit the rest of the property. So like this one, like I said, at least probably come back one more time here in 2 or 3 weeks when even more bucks have shed, but it was good to get out for the first time, and obviously didn't get skunked. We'll wait for the snow to melt off and get out again. So it's about that time of year. It's going to be pretty prime time here in a couple weeks to get out and find some antlers. So good luck out there, and hope it's a great off season.